Welcome to another episode of Rob Wright's Gen X Pop Culture. And today's episode, we're going to talk about Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day 2024, and so I thought I'd drop a video about one of my favorite movies as a kid growing up. Now, this movie came out in 1959, so I wasn't around then, but in the 80s growing up, they would show this movie on various stations around this time of year to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and to celebrate some of the Irish customs. And this movie is just a fun look at leprechauns and all the different superstitions. And it's just a fun story that you can get lost in and really have the spirit of St. Patrick's Day and shamrocks and everything that we associate with that. And so for me personally, I really enjoyed this movie. It's just a lot of fun. It's really about a man named Darby who is actually towards the end of his career, and he works as the keeper for a wealthy man, a wealthy lord, and he's actually going into forced retirement. And with that forced retirement, he has a daughter that's barely in her 20s, and he's trying to still provide for her. And he's trying to think about, what her life's going to be like if he retires and they're having to move. And then, just all the things that he has to go through with the replacement, who turns out to be Sean Connery. Anyway, so Darby also has a stint where he meets King Brian, the king of the leprechauns, and he gains 3 wishes and all the things that happen with those. So I just think it's a fun movie. It's one of those where you just get out the popcorn and just watch and just have a lot of fun. It's got some really classic songs in it, some beautiful violin music, and a catchy tune. That's the theme and the heart of the movie that I'll talk about. And it just is a really warm story. It also has a kind of a scary moment to it. I mean, there are some special effects that are really good in this for the time. And to be honest, as a kid, the Banshee kind of scared me a little bit. I'll talk more about that as we go, but it's a lot of fun. If you haven't checked out this movie, check it out. It's just a fun, enjoyable movie. And yes, it was made by Disney back in the day. So as we get into this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the production. I'm going to talk about the filming. I'm going to describe some legends, and then I'll end it with a couple of interesting facts about the movie that I found. So let's get started with Darby O'Gill and the Little People. So the production of this film started in 1947 when Walt Disney took a trip to Ireland, and he was just amazed with Ireland and Irish folklore. And so the next year he announced that they would make a film titled The 3 Wishes. And it was based on a script that they had about an Irishman battling a leprechaun. And the original film concept was supposed to be both animated and live action, kind of a combination. Well, unfortunately, that script really didn't go into development, and it kind of got shelved for another decade. And so upon making another trip to Ireland in 1956, Disney kind of announced a new film that year, and it was going to be entitled The 3 Wishes of Darby O'Gill. His writing team went with him, and they spent about 3 months at the Dublin Library researching Irish folklore, and they were looking at the 1903 book Darby O'Gill and the Good People. And so with their research at the Dublin Library, they also got input from several other groups about Gaelic and Irish folklore, and they developed this movie, and it really started to come together there. And then later on in February 1958, as they were starting production of the film, the name changed to Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Now, Disney had a great actor in mind, Barry Fitzgerald. Barry Fitzgerald is a fantastic actor. He's known for a couple of really great movies. How Green Was My Valley is a classic. And then one of my favorite movies, The Quiet Man, also had him in one of the top roles of that. It also starred John Wayne. And maybe I'll do that movie later on because that's one of my favorites of all time. Anyway, Barry Fitzgerald was who he wanted to play both Darby and King Brian. And kind of the idea I gathered from my research is that the reason why he wanted to play both is that it was kind of the old cartoons where you have the devil or the angel on your shoulder. Well, the leprechaun was kind of a figment of Darby's imagination, and they wanted him to be the same actor because that's how they would show that it was all in his head. Well, it turns out they kind of scrapped the idea when Barry Fitzgerald wasn't available, and they ended up hiring Albert Sharp as Darby, and I'll talk more about him in a minute. He's a fantastic actor, and they hired Jimmy O'Day to play King Brian, and that was a fantastic move because Jimmy O'Day was just incredible in this role. He nails it, and it's just fantastic, and he's actually an Irishman from Dublin. Anyway, Disney discovered Jimmy O'Day when he was doing a pantomime routine, and it's just fantastic how he discovered him. Another actress that he discovered was Janet Monroe, and she signed a 5-year contract with Disney, and she was featured in this film and several other Disney films. Another notable film that she's in is as Roberta in Swiss Family Robinson. So check out Swiss Family Robinson if you haven't checked that one out. That's another good film that she's in. Anyway, she signed a 5-year contract, and those are the first 3 main stars. And then they borrowed a phenomenal star, James Bond himself, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because it has James Bond ties to it. Sean Connery, who was working for 20th Century Fox at the time. So they borrowed him for this film. The filming started on the Disney backlot in May of 1958, although there was some location work that was done around other parts of California. And they did a good job with the sets and everything because it does look very green. And it looks like they got some of the mood and the themes of Ireland right. At least I thought they did, and did a real good job on that. So let's talk a little bit about Albert Sharp. So Walt Disney, again, had wanted Barry Fitzgerald, but in the 1940s, he saw Albert Sharp in a production of Finian's Rainbow, and he kept him in the mind for Darby. The only problem was Albert Sharp had retired by 1958, and Disney had to convince him to come out of retirement for this role. And I'm so glad he did because he does a wonderful job. So it's really interesting, all the things that went into it with gathering the actors. The other notable thing about this is Monroe and Connery have a duet, Pretty Irish Girl, which is just a fantastic song, very catchy. Sean Connery whistles it and sings it, and apparently what happened was, as they get into it, their vocals were overdubbed by Brendan O'Dawa and Ruby Murray, which were local Irish singers, and it was released in the UK as a single in 1959. A demo of Connery singing the song solo was included in the 1992 compilation, The Music of Disney, A Legacy of Song. So for the movie, part of it was dubbed, but Sean Connery really did sing part of it as well. Dell Comics also produced a comic book of an adaptation of the book in August of 1959. So fun stuff, interesting concept with the production of this movie. So this movie had a lot of interesting special effects, and one of them is how do you have normal actors show that they're varied in size? And so the leprechaun effect was interesting in this, and they took a high tech and complicated, but most of them were achieved very simple effects. And sometimes you'll see in movies that simple effects are the easiest and do the most good. I know in today's world we have CGI and all that technology, but in 1959 they had nothing anywhere near what we have today. So what they did was they placed a normal size actor closer to the camera than the tiny ones, and then lining them up on the same horizontal plane through the lens, so the distance between them cannot be detected. So it's kind of a trick of the eye. This technique is known as forced perspective. So forced perspective was used to film the little people and change the size. So you see it in this picture up in the far corner where Darby's in the cave of the leprechauns, the little people. And then I'll talk about the one in the middle where Walt Disney and Darby O'Gill are talking to King Brian. So the lighting used to make sure the lighting was used to make sure the actors were kept in proper perspective without seeming false and used up. So much electricity that it apparently blew up a substation in Burbank when the lights were turned on without warning. So, wow. So part of the technique of that is you got to have the lighting correct. And, in films, some of the key things are the lighting and the camera angles. All of that goes into the production of a good movie. And at the time, they did a fantastic job, technically speaking, with this movie and with the lighting on it. So the fact that they had so many lights and had to do so many things that it blew out a substation in Burbank is kind of hilarious. Jimmy O'Day and the other actors who played leprechauns were not given screen credit, nor did Walt Disney allow any other material to be published about them in the marketing for this movie. Well, that's not always true. I will tell you that Jimmy O'Day was on all the posters and was featured in the movie, so that's not quite true. What Disney was going for, and talking about this, is that he wanted to give the illusion that leprechauns were real. And so in the magical world of Disney, he talked about this and did something on the Tales of Leprechauns. And there was an episode where I captured the King of the Leprechauns, in which Darby, played by Albert Sharp, and Jimmy O'Day, playing King Brian, were on the set of that. And the picture in the middle that I show is Walt Disney interviewing them. And basically the idea that Disney had was that leprechauns are real and that they convinced King Brian and his people to be part of this film, which is really cool, like a neat idea, a great way to keep the illusion and the magic of a movie like this accurate and ready for the release. And so it helped with the marketing. But really, in reality, the notion the actors playing the leprechauns were not credited is not true. Jimmy O'Day is even on the poster, and they all got screen credit and, fell within the actor studios. It's just Disney wanted to create an illusion that they were real. So that's a little bit about the actors and kind of the production of this. Let's get into some of these legends. So there are 4 really interesting legends that come out of this film. Obviously, leprechauns are our main theme, but another theme is a polka, which we'll talk a little bit about, a banshee, and then we'll talk about the death coach. So it's really, really fascinating. So there's a scene where Darby is lured to the well on the mountaintop, and he's chasing his horse, but it's not really his horse he's chasing, but a polka, which is a mythological beast that can appear in the form of various animals. When Darby later learns that Katie is chasing a horse later on in the movie, he recognizes that this is the same polka. Apparently, polkas can either be a danger or a friend. And one of the best known polkas that we have out there in classic literature and classic movies is Harvey, the 6-foot tall rabbit from the movie Harvey, starring Jimmy Stewart. If you haven't seen that movie, it's very funny, very famous. There's actually a stage play done about it as well. And that's what a polka is. So it's interesting, fascinating. I didn't know that as a kid, but it was fascinating. And the effects that they used on the horse were interesting for the time. Now, the middle picture is more of an alien's take on a polka, which is kind of funny. I put it on here because it was kind of cool. It was kind of like the mother of the aliens. And you can see kind of almost a horse face with it grappling out, but that didn't appear in the movie. The one on the upper right is the one that they used the effect for the polka. The other key character in this, and I said it kind of scared me as a kid because it is kind of frightening to see the banshee. And so in Irish legend, the banshee is often said to be seen combing her hair as she approaches. And you actually see that in the film. Although the technique that they used makes it difficult to see, the banshee does comb its hair as she's approaching Darby. And it's really interesting and kind of spooky at the same time. And Darby chases it off a couple times. The banshee effect was achieved by shooting in black and white against a black background. The banshee are entirely white. The negative was then printed, enlarged, and kept out of focus. It was then added into the film using the optical printer, which just a cool effect. Like I said, the banshee kind of scared me because it just appears and it's almost like a ghostly appearance. And basically my understanding of a banshee is they represent death. They represent that somebody's going to pass away. And Darby was very keen to that because he heard the wail of the banshee before his wife had passed away. And that's how he was familiar with the banshee along with the legend. The death coach is interesting. It's basically, it's to carry the soul onward is kind of the idea of the death coach, and it always has to have one passenger, according to the film. So basically, Darby, in the movie, spoilers ahead, Darby has an encounter with the death coach, and King Brian's there, and he makes a decision there. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it's interesting what he does. And you have this death coach, and the interesting thing about it was kind of the effects that they used. Kind of the same technique with the shadowing. It looks rather spooky, and it kind of scary seeing a death coach flying from the sky and then coming to land here on Earth. So very scary. So let's talk a little bit more about the legend of the leprechauns. So the leprechauns have an underground lair, which I showed on a previous slide, and they've got various artifacts here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those artifacts. So in his underground kingdom, King Brian shows Darby several treasures. And a lot of these treasures were taken out of Irish mythology. So you have the throne of, I'm going to butcher this, but I hope I get it right, Fergus MacLeody, the king of Ulster, who, like Darby, was given 3 wishes by a tribe of little people, possibly the earliest ancestors of leprechauns. The sword of Brian Boru, the 10th and 11th century king who fought against the Vikings. The gold cup of King Cormac MacArt, given to him by the sea god Manamacnan Maclar, which I totally butchered that, which would shatter if 3 lies were told over it, but then it would repair itself when 3 truths were told over it. Kind of interesting. And the harp mentioned in Thomas More's poem, then once played at Terrace Hall, ancient seat of the rulers of Ireland. The harp once through Terrace Hall, the sound of music shed, now hangs as mute on Tara's walls, as if that soul were fled. So sleeps the pride of former days, so glory's thrills is o'er, and hearts that once beat high for praise now feel that pulse no more. No more to chiefs and ladies brought the harp of terror swells. The chord alone that breaks the night is a tale of ruin tells. Thus freedom now seldom wakes. The only throb she gives is when some heart indignant breaks to show that still she lives. So interesting poem about the harp, and it's Thomas More, who you may know as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. So interesting stuff there. So those are a little bit about the legends. I thought that they were interesting portrayed in the movie. I thought that the scene with the leprechauns in their halls and seeing all the treasures was pretty cool with the throne. And we'll talk about the canon coming up. Like I mentioned, the Banshee was kind of cool. The polka is interesting because you just think it's the regular horse, and then the regular horse shows up in another part of the mountain. I guess Darby, the horse goes away one route, and Darby doesn't see it and then follows the polka. But that's interesting. That's fascinating to me. Let's wrap this episode of Darby O'Gill up with some more facts about it. Here you can see some other characters in the movie. You see Darby up in the far left talking with King Brian, and you see his throne, and you see the gold and the treasures in there. You see the priest, who is a significant role in this, has Darby go pick up a bell, which is interesting. And then you see the main antagonist, Pony, just covering his face a little bit. But there's an interesting entanglement between him and Michael in this, and it's a really interesting stuff. I don't want to spoil the movie because it's a lot of fun, and it's a really good fight at the end. But here are some amazing facts about this movie that don't often get mentioned. So this movie brought Sean Connery to the attention of Albert Broccoli, who went on to cast Sean Connery as James Bond. So yes, this movie brought Sean Connery into that famous role as 007. Now, could they have maybe discovered him and cast him in the role as 007 without this movie? Probably, because he's just such a wonderful actor, but this movie really set the table for him to get that role, which is very interesting. The movie was released 1 year after the copyrights of the book and stories went into public domain. So that was very interesting. Albert Sharp, who plays Darby, didn't know how to play the violin. And in the movie, he plays several wonderful tunes on the violin. And so they hired two professional musicians to create the illusion. So one of them is bowing, and the other one is handling the fingers while Sharp kept his hands out of the way. So it's very interesting how they did that. And the music is just fantastic. Beautiful tunes on the violin. The lines of poetry quoted by Katie and Michael up on the hill are the hills of old Ireland. How wondrously they stand. It's the hills of Ireland, how wondrously they still stand is the name of the full poem. It's from the poem Pillar Towers of Ireland by Dennis Florence McCarthy. So it's just a beautiful poem, and it's a good scene where they're up at the top of the mountain and the ruins of the castle overlooking all the valley, and it's a great scene. The movie was released on bill with the Donald Duck cartoon, Donald and Math Magic Land. So if you've never seen Donald and Math Magic Land, you should see it. It's a good short. I'm kind of a math nerd in a way, and I really love that cartoon. So I think that cartoon is fitting. Back in the day, they would release a cartoon as a featurette prior to a movie, and Disney really took advantage of that with their cartoons and with their live action features. And what a great cartoon to pair with this movie. One other thought about this, it is on Disney Plus, and take this with what you will, but apparently the Disney Plus version is dubbed. I always say, if you love a movie, get it on physical media, because you never know. They could take it down off of Disney Plus, and you may not be able to see it for a number of years. So that's part of the reason why I always suggest that you have physical media, so you can watch it whenever you want. And then, unfortunately, we have different movies that are parts of the movies are being changed or cut out to fit with whatever social norms for today. And if you want the movie in its original form, get it on physical media. That's always been a suggestion for me. The last little bit I'll talk about is King Brian and the cannon that they have. And I couldn't really find a good picture of the cannon, but he displays the cannon with the treasures, which he says was taken from a Spanish ship. And basically, in real life, the Spanish Armada was wrecked on the coast. It refers to the 1588, when the fleeing through the stormy seas, an attempt to invade England. The Spanish ships did not make it, and they were wrecked off the coast of Ireland. And there were about 24 different ships that were wrecked and forced to make landfall on the Irish coast between Kearney and, I know I'm going to butcher this, Antrim. Under the pressure from the English-controlled government, survivors of the shipwreck were ruthlessly hunted down and treasures were confiscated. So, interesting nod to that and a historical fact. So, anyway, this is Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Let me know what you like about this movie. Share your comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.